Morning, Member Rosen.
Morning. How's everybody doing?
Morning, Member Rosen. Good morning, Cindy.
Morning.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Okay, we'll get started. Good morning. My name is John Von Paris, and I'm serving as the chairman for the MDTA Finance Committee meeting this morning. I hereby call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order at 9 a.m. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the live streaming law, this meeting is being conducted via video conference and being live streamed on the MDTA Finance Committee webpage. All members will have their video active during the entirety of the meeting. I ask that anyone who is presenting or answering a question, please turn your video and audio on. When you are done, please turn your video off and put your audio on mute. To minimize background noise during the call, I would ask that everyone on the line please mute your phones except when speaking. There are no members of the public, no elected officials, and no members of the media pre-registered to speak at today's meeting. At this time, we will move on to agenda number 1. The open and closed session minutes from December 8th, 2020. Has everyone had an opportunity to read the minutes? Are there any changes or comments, or if not, is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Okay, a motion from Member Rosen. Is there a second?
Member Ardinger, I will second.
Okay, second from Member Ardinger. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, opposed? Motion carried. The minutes are approved. Thank you. Item number 2, we will move on to item number 2, contract number J01B06000021 Enterprise Budget Software Solutions. And we have presenters this morning. Lisa, are you presenting?
Yes, sir, I am. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I believe Jeff Davis is going to lead in with a little bit of information to help explain what contract was used for this. Is Jeff on the line?
Yes, thank you. For the record, my name is Jeff Davis, Maryland Transportation Authority, Division of Procurement. And the contract that Ms. Arthur is about to present is a unique type of procurement. So I wanted to give you all a little bit of background before she presented it. What we're talking about today is an intergovernmental cooperative purchasing agreement. So this is an RFP conducted by multiple states in order to get the best possible pricing for a multitude of services. So I'm going to go in a little bit more specifics, but that's at a high level, that's what it is. So this one is run by the National Association of State Procurement Officials. NASPO is a public body of public procurement officers established in 1947. And what they have is called the Value Point Contract, where a state will host an RFP and member states will support it. So I would like to give you a little bit more detail about this specific contract. So the NASPO Public Cloud Solutions contract was procured via a request for proposals with the intent to achieve more favorable pricing that is obtainable by a single entity because of the collective volume of potential purchases by numerous government entities. The NASPO RFP, led by the state of Utah with 5 other states listed as participants, resulted in 58 proposals received for cloud solutions. During evaluation, some of them were eliminated for various reasons, they ended up with 38 master agreements for cloud solutions that can be used by any state agency under the NASPO Cloud Solutions contract. So this would be akin to us purchasing services off of a do-it contract or other state contracts. Many of the major industry firms participated in this RFP and were awarded master agreements. Complex terms and conditions that are generally inherent in an IT contract of this type have already been negotiated, and the state can negotiate additional terms and conditions if required by state regulations or conditions that are specific to this project. Per the terms of the RFP, entities utilizing the master agreement have the option to request quotes from as many or as few master contractors as is determined to be in the best interest. The MDTA issued at the beginning of this process, the MDTA intended to issue the scope to all available master contractors who can provide the services that Lisa is about to present. So I didn't know if my stammering, if I missed over any of the important details, but this is a public agency creating a large pool of contractors and services. They have met all of the competition requirements that we would have in our state procurements, and then it allows us to seek vendors from that list, knowing that we would have the best possible pricing for those services because of the vast number of participants in the NASPO contract. Anybody have any questions about that background information?
Any questions from any
Okay,
members?
thank you.
Okay.
Okay. So good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Lisa Arthur, and I'm the Senior IT Project Manager presenting for approval of contract number J01B060021, OpenGov Enterprise Budget Software System. Please reference the memorandum included in tab 2, page 12 of the materials. Quick correction before I start, Joe Quattrone will not be joining me for this presentation. Instead, Kaushik Dutta is on the phone. He's the Assistant Director of the IT Project Management Office for MDTA. He's joining us in case any questions come up that he may be able to help respond to. This contract will provide MDTA, Division of Finance, ability to create an annual budget by line item for multiple divisions and programs. Multiple budget requests can be captured simultaneously and can dynamically and without batch process be rolled up to a unified budget report. Additional functionality also provides the ability to monitor, analyze, forecast, and report budgetary spending across multiple years and multiple funding targets. And any associated measures of performance and outcome will be supported. If approved, this contract provides for the implementation and annual licenses for the OpenGov software, which is on a software as a service SaaS platform, with a 5-year base contract term with one-year renewal option. No MBE or VSBE goals were required because there are no subcontractable opportunities. Also, there were no protests. The vendor is Carahsoft, and the amount is as follows. $2,054,832.38 for the 5-year base term, $348,402.06 for the 1-year renewal option. That brings the total to just over $2.4 million. Also to mention, the engineers bid for this, I think, was $2.5 million. The bid justification was not required. This contract, as Jeff mentioned, was procured as an intergovernmental cooperative purchase agreement using the National Association of State Procurement Officials, NASPO, Value Point Cloud Solutions Intergovernmental Cooperative Purchasing Contract. 3 master contractors authorized to supply OpenGov products were requested to submit quotes. 2 responded. The the recommended awardee provided the lowest priced quote. This contract exceeds the delegated procurement authority for MDTA, and therefore it will be presented at the Board of Public Works, which is currently scheduled to be March 24th, 2021. And so that's all I have. Does the committee have any questions?
I have a question more as a FYI for my own sake. How come this contract exceeds our delegated procurement authority? Is that because of how it's procured through the open contract?
I'm going to defer to Jeff on that. Jeff, can you respond?
Yes, because this has the ability to use an intergovernmental. Can I say ICPA? The ability to use an ICPA has not been delegated to us in this dollar range. Because of the price of the contract, much like any of our other IT or maintenance contracts that exceed $200,000, we take them to the Board of Public Works for approval. But in this particular case, we do not have delegated authority to purchase such a large contract from an ICPA.
Jeff,
Okay.
in this, sorry, I didn't put my camera. But Jeff, in this scenario, even if we would have done an RFP for a $2 million contract, would it have still required Board of Public Works approval?
Yes.
So it's the dollar amount is driving it more so than the procurement method. Regardless of the procurement method, at $2 million, it would have required BPW approval.
Correct.
How often do we use this procurement method, this open contract? I think it's interesting, but I haven't heard about it before.
This is the first one that I have worked on at the MDTA. I believe it might be the first one that we have done. Kashik might know if we've done another one.
Yes, we have done the MDTA in-car video also has been done through the NASPO contract.
Okay, thank you. And
No.
you'll be seeing a few more, I believe. This is a very progressive and modern method for expediting procurements and getting terms and conditions ironed out ahead of time, which saves a lot of time in a procurement, as well as you know that you are getting favorable pricing because of all the member states that are involved in this program.
Another aspect of like leveraging the buying power of multiple agencies. You know, a different format, we do it through an interagency agreement, but when we buy our transponders, we leverage the buying power of all of EasyPass collectively to help get lower prices. So the contracts that have the ability that's leveraged multiple agencies results in better pricing generally.
Thank you.
Member Von
Did
Paris,
that
I
answer?
also
I have
had a
a,
question.
I do. I have a question or two, if I may.
Sure.
I guess I assume, and I don't want to assume, but we've done a very thorough due diligence on this. Is that accurate? And the other thing is, what kind of training will be involved with this software, and will any issues with COVID impact training?
I will let Lisa answer the training question, but you were asking about the due diligence. Were you talking about best value or
Well, the whole,
or
both the,
okay, reviewing of the proposals?
I guess checking on references, others that are using it, and all of that, the software and the reliability of it.
Understood. I think Kashik might have some background on that for you.
So we had looked at both the contracts in a detailed manner and made sure that we get the best value for the state, and that's what we recommended back to the commit to the procurement officer. Lisa, do you want to talk about the training part?
The training requirements, I have not, I just recently received this project from Joe Quattrone, and I am in the process of going through the requirements now to become familiar. Typically, what we've been doing on our IT projects, because of COVID, is we've been moving training to an online platform. The vendors have been, thus far that I've worked on previous projects, have been willing to work with us on that. I would envision this would go the same way, but again, I haven't specifically looked at the training requirements to be able to respond. I can get back to you later if you'd like more detail.
So, what I think maybe Lisa might be able to give a little bit of background on how we did training on one of the project which we did. So I think we reserved online for 4 hours for a group of people, and that's how we did the training for multiple days. Like we did a training for high level users for 2 days, having only 4 hours. And then again for the mass, we did a 20 people training for 4 hours. Some of the training material were also online, so people were able to look at the training material and get a feed for that also.
We'll ensure
Thank you.
we'll ensure that all users are able to use the system, and we've decentralized a lot of the budget responsibilities where finance provides the oversight and overall direction with the budget. We'll ensure that each RC that uses the budget will use his budget system as well as finance is fully capable of its functionality. Today, the budget, and Chris can certainly speak to this, our entire operating budget's maintained in Excel today, and it is spreadsheet upon spreadsheet that builds and builds upon itself. So you know the size of our operating budget, and when we have to make adjustments, and we have to make a change to like personnel, that is the first spreadsheet. And so whenever I have to reach out to Chris and we have to make some type of an adjustment, I sit and pause first, because I recognize how much work and how many hours need to be reinvested to make the smallest of changes that has to be made up in the beginning of the process. And then it builds and it ripples all the way through everything, every single spreadsheet. So the system's very much needed, and we'll make sure that everyone's fully trained to be able to use it and leverage the power that an automated system can give us that Excel just cannot.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Tasha. Any other questions?
This is Member Ardinger. And Deb, I think you kind of touched on this. I just want to understand, this software program is going to give us the ability to do something that we are already doing, or is going to simplify. I'm not quite sure what this program is specifically doing that we're not doing now.
Okay, so Chris Thompson, as well as Chantel, who's been very, very close to this project, let me let Chris, begin to address it, because she's the primary person that feels the pain of the Excel files throughout the year. So Chris, do you mind talking about the software and what we're going to gain?
Yeah, this software, so right now what we do is we get a lot of spreadsheets. As Deb said, it's all Excel based. So we send out spreadsheets to the field, they fill it in, they send it back, we combine it, and basically this system is going to be, the field will be able to enter their data, put comments in it, attach documents, all that kind of stuff that you can do in one unified system, where we won't have all these multiple spreadsheets. And as Deb said, you know, if we have a change in pension rate, we can go in and make one change and it'll update every RC, every, and roll up into the summaries that we provide to the board. But that's the big part of it. And the documentation is an important piece to me because, you know, right now it's a lot of memory for me. I mean, it's a lot of, you know, I know this stuff like the back of my hand because I've been doing it for a while. But, you know, there's going to come a day where I'm not here. So I don't, the documentation will be in the system so that people can refer back to, well, what happened here? And we'll have all that and we'll have more documentation. You know, there's some things that we're looking at too, like when we have reclasses within the system, you know, within personnel, we currently don't do a lot with that right now. We'll get a better handle on that. Possibly some more better, more reliable data for reporting for maybe vehicles, you know, looking at mileage and things like that. It's going to provide us more background information also.
Great. I mean, it sounds like it'll make you more efficient in the end, just from the sounds of it. I guess my only concern would be as to that it doesn't delay the reports in any way in the implementation of the software. So I guess that'll come down to the training. Or you be running systems, dual systems? Could it cause some kind of issue there?
So I imagine the reporting will move to the system. Currently, like the reporting that we provide on a quarterly basis and actually that the managers see on a monthly basis is coming out of a system called Management Reporter, which is a module under the Dynamics system. And it's envisioned that there will be a feed from this system to from Dynamics to the system, so that we'll have the same level of reporting that we currently have, if not better.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to pipe in here for a second. This OpenGov, this system is totally used by Harford County for their entire budgeting system. Okay. It was developed for them, well, not developed exclusively for them, but developed and they moved their entire budgeting system over. When you mentioned, are you running dual systems? They move everything over, and it not only does all the financial work, but you get charts, graphs. I mean, it is an explosive system. It's amazing what it can do. And when you talk about speed, once you make one of those changes, it'll do all the charts for you automatically. It does it better than Excel. I mean, if you're real interested, you can probably talk to Harford County and get you some kind of a sit down with them, and it'll just blow you away. But we had our IT group look at it. We had our finance group look at it to see if this system would work. Right now, the system we have is unmanageable to a large extent, and this would ease all of our operations for finance. And so it's really an important system for us to move forward on. Very dynamic.
Member Von Paris, I wanted to get back to a question you had asked previously about user training and the resources. I had a moment to review the vendor's proposal again, and they have a hybrid approach. They have multiple tools available: online teaching, software walkthroughs, online resource centers. They also have a learning management system for the software, and they have technical support ticketing within the interface. But they are offering a multiple layered approach that they will negotiate with our IT team when they're, I guess, finance and IT team when they're ready to implement. And they do offer online training for the software.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I also want to say David Goldsboro was involved in this in the very, very infant stages, if you will. And I remember his reaction. He was totally blown away by the power that this thing has for our finance system. So I was equally surprised by his, I guess, his excitement by it. And so, as you know, he's a real professional. So I think it is a good system.
Okay, thank you all for your explanations and answering the questions. I would guess there would be a timeline for implementation as well, but I don't have any sorry, Lee, go ahead. Do you have any questions, comments, Lisa?
No, I don't. I'm okay if you don't have any additional questions for me.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from the members? Okay, we'll call a motion. Is there a motion to advance this item to the board for further consideration?
So moved. Member Carroll.
Member Carroll, motion is second.
Second, Member Rosen.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you. Motion
Thank you.
carries. Thank you, members.
Thank you.
Thank you all for presenting today. Appreciate that. Comments from all the team members here today. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item, item number 3, fiscal year 2021 budget, amendment number 2. And Christina.
Good morning. I'm
Morning.
here to request a recommendation for approval to amend the FY21 operating budget. The budget policy in the trust agreement allows the budget to be amended anytime during the current fiscal year. Overall, the budget increases by $1.4 million. On December 16, 2020, the governor announced the restoration of a 2% COLA, which was negotiated in the state contracts for state employees represented by the ASME and MPEC in 2019. The announcement also indicated that the state will be restoring increases that were negotiated but withheld from the state's police unions. As a result of this announcement, MDTA employees will receive a 2% COLA and police will receive their step increase effective January 1, 2021. The net result of this action is an increase in personnel expenses of $1.3 million. In addition, funding has been added for the premium pay the police received during the first quarter of the fiscal year. Due to COVID-19, that totals about $0.6 million. There is a reduction in the budget associated with an increase in turnover of $0.5 million for the port and the airport to bring their budget in line with the agreed upon amount. That I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from any members?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the budget update.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a
Member
second?
Ardinger,
We have a motion from Member Rosen, a second from Member Ardinger. Is there any further discussion? Okay, all in favor we will say is motion to, well, let me just clarify. Motion is to advance this item to the full board for consideration. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Christine. Okay, we will move on to item number 4, Board Resolution 2101. Alan Garman is here. Good morning, Alan.
Hi, good morning. Thank you. I also have Jim Walsh from MAA on to help present this item and answer questions.
Hi, Jim. Welcome.
Good morning.
Board Resolution 21-01 is seeking authorization from the board to use a portion of the PFC 2019 bond proceeds to retroactively and advance fund a portion of debt service in the years 2019 through 2023. This is really done in response to the diminished enplanements at BWI Airport associated with the pandemic. The MAA has the flexibility to defer certain projects that were designated in the original financing resolution. And I think if you recall, back in December, the MDTA took a similar action where we transferred some unrestricted cash in an effort to increase our own debt service coverage. So this is a similar action by transferring funds from the bond proceeds account. The MAA's goal is to meet their own internal 1.5 times debt service coverage target. We've talked to bond counsel and the municipal advisor, and they'd helped formulate this plan and made sure that it met with tax law requirements. The rating agencies have published several reports that I've read that have indicated they view these types of actions as prudent responses to the pandemic and the diminished revenues. There's not a lot to say beyond that. I think maybe if Jim could address any questions you might have about the project deferrals, or if there are any other questions.
Yeah, I'm just curious, Member Rose, I'm just curious about what other repercussions and ramifications down the road. I understand the near-term necessity to do this to make sure we remain in compliance. But if things don't change or if things level out and now these reserves aren't there, what happens? Can capital projects not be pursued down the road? Just curious.
So Member Rosen, Jim Walsh from Maryland Aviation. We are deferring 2 projects. Although they are important, they're not critical for our operation. One project was a reconstruction of our federal inspection service area where international passengers are cleared. There's very little activity in the COVID environment, so we think we can defer that. The second project is a HVAC project for our Concourse D. We think we can get by for several years by deferring that project as well. So although again, they're projects that are important to us, we believe they can be deferred. The boosting of coverage just takes a priority in the current financial environment. So no long-term detriment is envisioned.
Thank you.
I think, it's interesting that the airport has quite a bit of financial flexibility like we do. So in addition to the bond proceeds, there's an improvement account that's tied to that financing. So some of their work is essentially pay-go, like the MDTA's, where they're paying for it from excess net operating revenues. So their coverage looks very tight in fiscal 21 based on the projections that I've seen. And, I guess to your point, Member Rosen, is that there's some expectation that revenues will pick up, particularly, post-vaccine and then into next fiscal year. But they're trying to keep that coverage healthy and above 1.5 times. In the event that there's lingering effects on travel, they can tap the improvement account as well to boost coverage. So there's been some discussion with bond counsel about potentially transferring funds over from the improvement account to lower debt service. So that's something that we can explore further. So there's certainly things, there's refinancing transactions, there's transfers of, essentially reserves that can be done. There's certainly more flexibility than just this one action, but I think it was the easiest thing to take a look at, and that's why it's been, explored and discussed the most with bond counsel and the advisors. So what we're seeking is a recommendation to move forward to the full board for the approval of the resolution to permit the transfer of 12.9 million of the bond proceeds over to the debt service accounts.
Okay. Any other questions for the members? Okay, thank you, Alan. Is there a motion to advance this item to the full board for consideration?
So move, Member Carroll.
And second?
Artinger will second.
So we have a second from Member Rosen. Any further discussion? Okay, further discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, members.
Thank you.
Thank you, members.
Thank you. And Alan, you will provide an update on item 5 on the update on the non-recourse financing and loans annual update. So you're still up, right?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's a
Okay.
sort of a timely update because it relates back to the prior resolution, and Dana is also presenting on this item, Dana Tate. The MDTA acts as a non-recourse issuer, which means that we issue debt for other entities within the state. Non-recourse means that they're secured by separate trust agreements. So there's a separate lien on source of pledged revenues that are not the revenues of MDTA. 3 of those financings are at BWI Airport, so we'll have some focus on that this morning because they're most impacted by COVID-19 relative to the other 2 financings. And then Dana's also going to cover some MAA and MDOT loans that the MDTA is providing. If you refer on to, there's a large table, and I think it helps to maybe frame the discussion, is that it's beneath the analysis section. The 5 non-recourse financings include a consolidated rental car facility at BWI, and that's backed by car rental fees. And then there are the PFC bonds, where several series of those bonds that were issued, and they're backed by an emplainment fee. And then there's the parking garage bonds at BWI that are backed by parking fees. And then the other 2 unrelated financings, one was for the Calvert Street parking garage, which is a state employee parking garage in Annapolis. Those bonds are backed by state appropriation. And then there are WMATA garages. There are 3 parking garages, Metro Rail parking garages in PG County, and they're backed by parking fees. Focusing in on the 3 BWI financings, interestingly, the parking garage is sometimes referred to as an open trust. So the revenues flow in to a revenue account, and then once a month we set aside, or the trustee sets aside funds for debt service, and then the excess net operating revenues flow out to the transportation trust fund. So because of the diminished traffic at the airport, there's then diminished parking revenues, and the airport and MDOT are engaged in a refinancing transaction for those bonds. Revenues in recent months have not been sufficient to meet the set aside. So we were able to make debt service in September, but there weren't going to be sufficient revenues to meet the upcoming March 1st payment. So that's why the refinancing is timed for this February, for next month. So those bonds will be fully refinanced. And the implications for MDTA is that the bonds, the new issue, are going to be a completely different credit. They're called general airport revenue bonds, and they're being issued by MDOT, not the MDTA. So that financing is essentially going to end with MDTA. The bonds will be defeased legally. So funds are going to be, bond proceeds will be deposited in an escrow account that will be sufficient to legally defease the bonds. So once the bonds are legally defeased, the trust essentially terminates, and the MDTA's leasehold interest will also terminate. So we'll no longer have any involvement in those parking garage bonds at the airport. Moving on to the PFCs, similar with the parking garage, with the diminished, severely diminished emplanements nationally, the revenues are, quite a bit lower than normal. So unlike the parking garage where it was an open trust and monies are flowing out, I wanted to refer you to this smaller table that's titled non-recourse debt. It was below the larger table. The second row in there was BWPFCs. And you can see the debt service fiscal 21 is about 25 million. Supporting that debt service, we have a debt service reserve that can be drawn upon in the event that revenues are not sufficient. That reserve is sized approximately to annual debt service of 25 million. And then we discussed the improvement account in the last agenda item. So that improvement account holds net operating revenues essentially. So revenues flow into a revenue account, then they're transferred out to fund debt service monthly in 1/12 increments, and then the excess flows into the improvement account. So in the early months of this fiscal year, any months that revenues were not sufficient to meet that 1/12 set aside, the trustee would transfer over some funds from the improvement account to essentially fully fund that debt service. And those funds are pledged under that trust agreement to bondholders. So there's a very large reserve there that exceeds annual debt service. For perspective, the last numbers that I saw from MAA was they were projecting a recovery and being close to 1x coverage for this fiscal year, but it's expected to pick up obviously in the second half. Then moving on to the consolidated rental car facility, it works in similar fashion to the PFCs. There's also an improvement account, and you can see in that small table that debt service in this fiscal year is about 9 million. There's also a debt service reserve that can be drawn upon. But before that would happen, there's an improvement account that exceeds annual debt service. So there have been some transfers early in this fiscal year from the improvement account to help cover debt service. But again, there's an expected recovery that should bring coverage back up. There's also a coverage reserve that could be drawn upon, but that improvement account is pledged to bondholders. And I think Jim was going to remain on the call if there are any questions, but there are very few significant capital projects that could draw upon that improvement account at this point. So there's a lot of flexibility with this financing as well to defer any capital projects related to the consolidated rental car facility. I guess I'll pause there because I'm not sure if there are any questions about the BWI financings, and the others are a little bit more straightforward and unrelated. Are there any questions about the BWI financings? Okay, hearing none, I'll move on to WMATA. Interestingly, WMATA is also doing something that's similar to the BWI parking garage. The way this deal is structured is that there's an a surcharge reserve account that's outside of these trust accounts. So the surcharges that are collected for these parking garages flow into a surcharge account, and the MDTA bills WMATA twice a year for debt service. They have a surcharge account that exceeds the amount of outstanding bonds currently. And so we've been working with them for many months on potentially paying off those bonds and encouraging them. So they've decided to essentially legally defease the bonds. So that's expected to occur this month. So WMATA will be transferring over approximately 18 million from the surcharge account to pay off the bonds. We'll transfer the monies out of the debt service reserve and move all those monies into an escrow account that will fund the next 3 principal and interest payments to the call date, which is July of 22. So the bonds, once they're legally defeased, so we'll have enough money in that debt service account to cover the debt service for the next 3 payments, and also, call the full principal outstanding at that call date. Essentially, once that's done, we'll receive a letter essentially from the trustee that says the bonds are legally defeased, and at that point, our leasehold interest will terminate and the whole trust will terminate. So we'll no longer have any involvement in those WMATA park garage bonds. The next financing is the Calvert Street parking garage. There's not a whole lot to mention there. The garage is completed many years ago, and semi-annually, we essentially request through the Department of General Services debt service, and that's funded through state appropriations. And it takes us over to the MDOT and MAA loans, and I'm going to turn it over to Dana to present those items.
Okay, your back button.
Okay, can you hear me now? So, in 2018, the MDTA board authorized the MAA loans and MDOT TRP loan for certain projects. The first MAA loan of $20 million was executed in February of 2020 to fund Concourse A improvements phase 2 at the BWI airport. The loan proceeds have been fully drawn. The loan has a fixed interest rate of 1.53% based on the financing costs of comparable maturities, the Series 2020 bonds. Principal and interest payments begin in January of 2021, and the loan will mature in July of 2033. The loan can be prepaid at any time. The second MAA loan of $65 million, which will provide funding for the aircraft maintenance facility land improvements, has been delayed indefinitely. This is subject to Federal Aviation Administration approval and the planning or the priorities of Southwest Airlines post the pandemic. And then lastly, the MDOT TRP loan. The $50 million loan was executed in June of 2019 to provide a portion of the initial funding for MDOT's P3 traffic relief plan for the development of toll lanes on both the I-495 and the I-270. The loan proceeds have been fully drawn. The loan has a fixed interest rate of 1.53%, with principal and interest payments deferred to July of 2021, and debt service payments extend to January of 2034. The loan can be prepaid at any time. And so this concludes the non-recourse debt financings update. Are there any questions?
I guess one clarifying point on the second 65 million, we had initially thought that was delayed indefinitely, but MA has provided an update that the first Southwest Airlines is moving forward with that. So there was some question following the pandemic if they would move forward. So apparently from what we've been told is they're going to move forward, and site work is expected to begin in July of 2021. So we will be working on finalizing that loan agreement, and I would expect that the draws on that loan would start sometime next fiscal year.
So Alan, just to confirm, actually, I have two questions. When I look at this chart with all the it lists all the non-recourse debt. So following these actions and the refinancings and so forth, we will no longer be on the hook, so to speak, for the BWI parking and the WMATA because of those two deals, correct?
Yes, and I'm very pleased about that. It's quite an administrative burden, so it's nice to not have that work to do, and they get consolidated in with our financial statements, and we need to do continuing disclosure. So there's quite a lot of work that goes on with MDTA and this board about those financings. So they'll be relatively clean. They're both the exact same structure where we'll deposit monies in an escrow account and they'll be legally defeased. So the leasehold interests terminate and the trust essentially fold, or terminate themselves.
Okay. And I assume we considered similar arrangements for the other non-recourse financings, and those just were not possible?
Yeah, I think, this goes back several years ago. There's been some discussion, MDOT had some years ago gotten the ability to issue these types of non-recourse or conduit financings themselves. So, there had been a couple of financings done for BWI that one was through Medco, and I think another one was done directly through MDOT. So, there was some discussion about the PFCs and if the new financing should be done, through MDOT. But as I understood it, and this was going back several years ago, with so many financings already outstanding, there were some challenges of MDOT sort of taking over the new financings. And I don't recall all the details legally, but the trust accounts are held at Bank of New York Mellon, and all of those pledged revenues flow into that trust. And so I'm just speculating, I think you would need to have a new trustee bank and steer all those pledged revenues in there. I suppose we could talk to bond counsel about it being done. I've just not heard any discussion about that financing moving over or future financings to MDOT. And that's true of the consolidated rental car facility. There was also some discussion about a GARB credit, which is these general airport revenue bonds. They are typically can include a lot of different activities at airports, but they've typically, as my understanding is, they've excluded specifically PFCs and also consolidated rental car facilities. So I think that's the idea, that those two financings would remain separate and not be folded into, a general airport revenue bond credit. So I think it's, certainly possible that something could happen in the future. There's just no discussion about those other two financings, the consolidated rental car facility or the PFC-backed revenue bonds.
And we have a limit or a cap on how much non-recourse debt we issue, correct?
That's correct. It's contained in our debt policy, and I wish I could tell you what it was offhand, but I don't recall.
That was going to be my next question. So I'm just, you don't have to answer now. It looks like we have 431 million outstanding once we eliminate the parking garage and the WMATA. So it's about 118 less after that. So 307. I mean, it gets down close to about 300 million.
Right. I think, the board policy was set, and it was in place before I came in 2007. So I don't know what the genesis was. I mean, I think most importantly, there's no, subordinate lien on MDTA's toll revenues. There's no lien on MDOT's revenues. There's no support from the state. So these financings are supposed to stand alone. That said, possibly the board wanted to place some limit on those financings, either for administrative cost reasons or, other concerns. But, I think I feel comfortable that those are very clearly not, there's no pledge from MDTA's revenues. And I think that's been certainly supported during this stress period when there's been no discussion of looking to MDTA or MDOT or the state for support, particularly with the MAA parking garage. The work has been, and communicated to the rating agencies is that there's a debt service reserve in that case to fall back upon, and then there is certainly the option to refinance the debt, and that was the option that was taken.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay. Are there any other questions from any of the members? All right. Thank you, Alan and Dana and Mr. Walsh from MAA. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks for your comments and very good questions from the members today. All right. We will move on to the next item, number 6, and Jeffrey Brown.
Good.
Present. Hi, Jeffrey. Good morning.
Hi. Good morning, everybody. This is Jeffrey Brown, Budget Director for MDTA. When we were together with the full board, we got a contingency approval for their full year 2022 budget. It was contingent upon getting final DBM fringe rates. We have received those. So the purpose of my presentation is to update the board, update you guys on the impact of those rate changes. In total, the rate changes result in a $904,000 decrease in the budget. It decreases from $335.2 million to $334.3 million. The decreases in detail can be seen in the figure 1 that was provided in the documentation. You can see the detail of what was changing. From higher level, changes. Typically, the DBM gives us some rate changes or some direct allocation charges. In the case of the retiree health costs, they did decrease 2 points, and that resulted in a reduction of $339,000. The employee retirement system rates increased from 20.71 to 21.18%, and that increase resulted in $291,000 increase. The law enforcement pension, that was an increase as well from 42.96 to 43.76%, and that results in an increase of $349,000. The rest of the rates were really provided to us, and more allocations and direct rate changes. The biggest of those was the workers' compensation, and that resulted in a $1.2 million decrease. And you can see that's the real driver of most of the change. All the others, you can see the detail, the DOIT allocation, the retirement agency fee. There's some additional changes. All those together net to a reduction of $42,000. So taking into account all these changes, again, the decrease of the budget was $904,000. So the new full year 2022 budget is $334.3 million. Glad to take any questions at this time.
A question on the drop. This is a member of Von Paris. The question I have relates to the workers' comp. Is that based on experience, or is that based on reduction, or both?
I don't know directly what, like I said, that's a allocation that's done directly at DBM, so I didn't have any visibility of what was changing. I could assume industry, but I don't know directly. I could reach out and find out what the direct amount is. I mean, what the direct calculation is, but I don't see that directly.
Okay.
Member Von Paris, this is Chris Thompson. Yes, it is based on experience. Workers' comp looks, it's based on a history of payouts and what's in the pipeline that they, ongoing payments. So I don't know, it baffles me because it seems to vary so much. Like last year we had $1 million increase, and now this year we have $1 million decrease. It's hard to get really straight answers. I mean, because I've asked several times, but it is, Troy was on the line, he would be able to tell you a little better, but it is based on experience.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions from any members? Jeff, you have more to add?
Nope, I think that was it.
Okay. Thank you for the update. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
We will move on to item number 7. Deb Sharpless. Thank you, Jeff.
Good morning again. For this item, Cheryl Lewis-Thor and myself are going to split the item. Cheryl's going to present the information that was provided in your book, and you'll see that that's our standard format where we walk through traffic and revenue. This is normally presented on a quarterly basis. However, we had committed that we'll start providing this on a monthly basis, at least until we work our way through the impacts of COVID and transition. Will provide this on a monthly basis. So she'll begin. And then I provided additional, what I call supplemental information that was emailed to you late yesterday. I'll walk through those items. And what that does is it dives deeper into the legacy facilities and what we're seeing. So let me begin by turning it over to Cheryl to begin the discussion.
All right, good morning, members. For the record, my name is Cheryl Lewis-Thor, Revenue Director for MDTA. And as Deb mentioned, I'll be updating you on the status of revenue collected through November of 2020. I refer you to the memorandum under item number 7. Overall, our system-wide revenue is down $119 million from the same period last year. And we anticipated that due to COVID, that approximately 92 million of that decrease would be attributable to COVID. As of November 2020, revenue is $26.9 million below forecast, and transactions are 12.4 million below forecast. Of this $26.9 million shortfall in revenue, forecasted revenue, legacy facilities represent $11.5 million, and Deb will provide more details regarding this shortfall. The ICC represents $14.9 million of the $26.9 million shortfall of forecasted revenue, and once trip building and image processing is complete, we anticipate that the shortfall between the actual versus forecasted will be significantly mitigated. Lastly, the ETLs are about $500,000 below forecast. And again, once image processing is I think Deb's detailed analysis will give more information and probably answer questions there. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Okay, you're welcome.
So let me kind of step back 1 second. Okay, so the first piece is, as we expected, revenue is significantly down from this time last year, and that was part of the forecast. Now, the part that we're attributing to COVID versus the part that we're attributing to delays in transition, and we can talk about that some more between pieces that fall across the board. It's not just one particular issue that's affecting this. The reason that I assumed the part that is below because of transition is from a traffic perspective. Our traffic is where we had forecasted, and in some cases it's slightly higher than what we had forecasted. So that's a good piece of the story, because we can't create traffic, so we have traffic at the levels that we forecasted. The part that's impacting our forecast is the ability to process that traffic, process those transactions. And so that's the piece where attributing to what we've missed from the forecast. If traffic was below the volumes that we anticipated, then that wouldn't be attributed to delays with transitioning. And so the materials that I've provided you, I'm digging into the legacy facilities deeper. And so from a forecast perspective, we're below budget or forecast by 11.5 million. Now, if you look at the materials that I had sent you, let me verify everyone has that. Remember Carol and Rosen and Arninger and Von Paris? Okay. So the 11.5 is the combination of where are we from video toll revenue as well as ETC revenue. So ETC revenue, we're 15.5 below, and video, we're 4 million ahead. So when you net the two, that's how we get to the 11.5. So now starting off with video tolls, and what are we seeing? So the top part is where I'm just showing you what revenue was recognized from in the general ledger through November compared to what was forecasted at the time. And you can see we've collected $5.6 million. And if you recall, for revenue recognition, we have to do it on a cash basis. So this revenue that was recognized means it's monies that were received and in our bank account. So then the next thing that I looked at is, what is our collection rate? What are we seeing? So we had stopped mailing notices in mid-March, but that means that there were definitely February notices that had not gone out, and potentially there could have been a little bit of January. So that's why I started with January. And from a collections rate, everything is trending where we want it to be. So by and large, I'm starting with the top bar graph. Both of these graphs, it's the exact same information. It's just shown visually two different ways. So by and large, the blue part of the columns, that money very likely would have been received in fiscal year 20. And so when we're talking about this revenue that we received, the 5.6 million so far, that will be a combination of the 11.2, 12.5, and 1.4 data that's presented. And the older the notice, of course, the higher the collection rate. And so our February invoices, which would not have all been mailed, we were about 35%. And that has since gone up to about 58%. And then with March, we had started off right around 20%. A lot of those would have been individuals that went online and paid proactively. And then, now we're above 50% collection rate for those. April's also has moved up to 50%. And you can see that May and June is moving in the right direction. And so as of right now, we expect May and June to rise up to the levels of about where February, March is at. So again, the bar graph below that is showing the exact same information, just presented a little differently. Now, from a forecasting perspective, what did we assume in the forecast? And so in fiscal year 21, collections rate at the NOTD phase, so only when the NOTD was mailed, the assumption was a collections rate of 40%. So you can see that we're there for much of the collections that we're talking about, everything except for June, and some of the June invoices are likely not even due yet. Now, some may have been, but not all. And I think I'll speak to that in a second, because this is part of what makes tracking very difficult. I'll explain how notices are mailed in 1 second. And then, we grow the collection rate for fiscal year 21 up to 48% because some customers pay in these later collection phases, whether it's citations or afterwards. So from an assumption on collections, our results are aligning there. Now, why it's difficult to decisively tell you exactly what our collection rate is when notices are mailed, we use the term bundling. And so notices are bundled. And what that means is, let's suppose that as of mid-March, when we stopped mailing notices, the last notice mailed was February 28th. That doesn't mean that when we start mailing them, the first thing we're going to do is mail out 100% of March 1st, and then 100% of March 2nd, and 3rd, and so on. Notices aren't mailed in that manner. How they're mailed is whatever date has the oldest transactions, and that particular customer's notices, we mail that notice plus any other notices that are in the system. So if I had invoices that every month, then when we mailed mine, I would receive my March, my April, my May tolls. Whereas someone else may only have a toll outstanding in May, and their May invoices would not have been mailed because we haven't worked our way down to May being the oldest date. And so this bundling happens. It reduces the mailing costs significantly. And so in one respect, it's a positive to help control costs, but the negative side is it makes for calculating collection rates much more difficult. So, but at the end, the collection rate is trending in the right direction. Now moving to page 2, the first table you see is called video transactions mailed. And that's the number of notice of toll due as well as video toll transactions that the agency through Conduit has mailed out to customers. So the plus is that in December, we reached 1.8 million in that month of mailing out. Now, we have to be cautious with January results because we've done a couple things. One is the QA/QC process for reviewing the notices. We've increased that to a higher level than what was at December. We also have had some image quality issues for notices. We have instructed Conduit to reject those images if the quality is not of the standard that they need to be, which had slowed down the process for Conduit to an extent. Now we expect improved image quality by the time we get to the September transactions, and we know that because CAPTCH has done image review themselves, and the results of their image review, they fed it through to the operations side of their organization and started making adjustments to cameras. Now, there's other reasons that affect the quality of the image, including that the image in its native form is not what we need to pass through to conduit, so that affects the quality as well. So all of these issues we need to be mindful of, and we can't guarantee at this moment that although we reached the 1.8 million mark in December, that's the mark that we'll reach in January as well. For our forecast perspective, we had wanted to reach 1.8 by January. So that's where we are with mailing. Now the next part, and this is our focus area by far right now, because processing notices, collections, that's moving generally in the right direction. And it has to do with posting transactions. You can see that when we get later in the July, August, September, right on down to December, the number of transactions that we were able to process has significantly dropped. Will has been working very, very closely with Conduit, working with them to have additional resources added. Initial reports for the last 2 days, they were able to increase their daily average to 50,000. You know what? Let me double check something real fast. Or Will, was that 50,000 for the combined for 2 days, or was it 50,000 for the individual days?
So over the last 2 days, they processed a total of 115,000 transactions. So a little more than 50,000 per day.
Right. Okay. So their commitment, we've seen, in the last 2 days, we've seen, these resources at work, and we've seen the upward movement in the volume that they're processing. And this is certainly where a lot of our focus is going to be, because the largest driver right now of underperforming the forecast is the ability to process transactions. Again, not traffic volumes. So then we come down to the ETC revenue, and there you see that the revenue is laid out the same as video tolls. What have we recognized in the general ledger versus what did we forecast? And through November, we're $15.5 million below, and then you can see the percentage calculations for that. Now, a piece of this, roughly 5%, will be what we call I-tolls, whether they are in-state, which we call home-on-home, or away-on-home transactions. And before they can be posted, image review has to be processed. And so what an I-toll is where someone has an E-ZPass account, but their transponder did not read. It was waived. It wasn't in the vehicle. So something along those lines are the vast majority of what causes an I-toll. And so those transactions will be processed once the image review is completed. And then the last thing that's on the materials that I provided was transactions to be processed. And this is from July through September. And we have transactions that are sitting with CAPS. CAPS is in the process of forwarding over to Conduit legacy transactions for 4 of the facilities. We want to be able to keep Conduit in a place that they always have transactions to process, but not where we transfer an excessive amount where they can't process them prior to transaction, so that they're being metered over. Now, with the ICC, we had some images were lost on the CAPTCHA side. They have recovered a large amount of those images. They are still working on recovering ICC images as well. And that's the largest driver why many of the ICC transactions have not been transferred over. They initially they weren't transferred because Conduit had ample supply of transactions to process. And then as Conduit's been working down, we now had this image issue on the ICC, and that's why we're focusing on transferring over the legacy transactions. So let me stop and certainly answer any questions that you have. But the purpose of this was to give you greater visibility with regard to the legacy revenue and what we're seeing as we analyze the numbers.
Any questions from any members? Deb, thank you for the report. I do have a question. Really, I want to just focus on one particular question from an oversight standpoint. I know we're working through these technical difficulties with both the transition and also with the notice of tolls due, or NOTDs. I guess specifically, and some of this information is helpful. It's a little confusing to me. I guess I didn't have, I know you, and I appreciate you guys sending it out. But I really, I've kind of mentioned this, but I haven't really probably said it clearly enough. But I think from an oversight standpoint, I think it would be very beneficial to isolate the I guess the two areas that we have most concern that we just mentioned, that I just mentioned, those two areas that we have concern about: our revenue stream and the impact it has on our cash and so forth, obviously our revenue, and have a plan attached to that on how we're moving along to fix that. And as we, set some goals based on the processing of or fixing the technical processing difficulties, there would be a way that we can monitor the revenue, the impact plus or minus to our revenue and to our cash. And I don't, I'm not suggesting I have all the answers there, and I don't, but I just feel like there needs to be an isolated, a very focused report specifically for that, and based on a plan to resolve these challenges that we face in those two areas. I think that would be very helpful to the board to get a comfort level to make sure that we're making progress. I know there has been some progress. That's good, but I feel that I think the timeline is critical because time is money, and so again, I don't have all the answers. I certainly would open it up for some discussion here, but from other members. But I just feel like as challenging as it is for us, we have to find a way to have a timeline to resolve it, and to see the impact to our revenue and cash as we go forward. So, through my comments.
Yeah, I have another question too. I know we started mailing the NOTDs. I just, relative to those that we've already sent, what are we caught up to in terms of months? Meaning the NOTDs that are going out today, are those for, August and everything from prior to that? What are we catching up on?
So that's a very difficult question to answer because of how the bundling occurs. What they are not beyond mid-July. We know they cannot be beyond mid-July because Conduit doesn't have transactions beyond mid-July. So some of them, some customers have been mailed June transactions. We know that because as part of the certification, when something becomes a citation, some June transactions are being certified. But also, as of yesterday, we were certifying transactions from earlier months. So it's not like they mail day by day. And so that's why we can't give a date to say mailings are current through X date. All of the mailings have been for transactions mid-July and prior. That we do know.
Okay, so as part of the bundling process, they can't pull it by going back the furthest. I guess my concern is the older the older it gets, you know, if you think about vintage of collections, the harder it is to collect because that person, they're going to dispute that they ever did that trip back in March, and it just gets hard.
That's right. That's right, and that's why the graphs with the collection rates were provided, because it is safe to assume that all of the March notices have been mailed. And so with March, our collection rate is above 50%. And we, you know, once something goes through every single phase of collection, we maxed out our collection rate assumption at 48%. So we made that haircut because of the age of the transactions. And, you know, you know, we have positive stories and we have challenges that we're still working through. And so right this minute, our collection rate, considering the age of these transactions, is positive because we're achieving the collection rate that we anticipated.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that.
If I could too, oh, pardon me. I'm sorry, Member Rosen.
Okay.
If I could too, just one point to add that we are having a lot of dynamic conversations with both Capsh and Conduit on these kinds of options. Like right now, obviously, we're trying to work from an oldest first approach, but we've had discussions about, is there a way to maximize transaction processing? Is there a way to look at specific kinds of transactions and maximize those that would increase our revenue? And is there a way to automate certain ones to go quicker than other types of transactions? So, I mean, bear in mind this adding to the complexity of how the mailings are bundled is there's multiple kinds of transactions as well. They're not, if everything was just a straight video toll NOTD that goes over, this could potentially be simplified, but we've got iTolls mixed in there with the NOTDs. So it gets a little muddy, and I just want to assure you that we are asking the vendors these kinds of questions repeatedly at different points when it seems like there might be opportunities to change how we do it. It's not a static condition or where we just kind of accept that where we are is the only way to do it. But unfortunately, as Deb mentioned, I think the way that they are bundling it is probably, as of right now, the best that we've got. And so they're continuing to move forward. And, you know, we have to balance working with the vendors. Right now, we want to try to maximize how many transactions they're getting out the door. And the more we try to push them to try different things, it drops the transaction processing rate. So we kind of have to be careful of that as well, that, you know, if we stick to what they know how to do, that helps in some ways. So just a couple points to let you know that we're not just laying down and accepting where we are.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One other question, thought more as an aside to this, obviously this becomes less as we get more Easy Pass since we've introduced more video tolling and electronic tolling, have we increased the amount of Easy Pass penetration, or has that been static?
But we can come back and like anecdotally be able to answer questions like how many Easy Pass counts have been opened, because we have different types of transactions, and even within ETC, there are they fall into 6 different buckets, and so because transactions are at different stages, like a transaction where the transponder read for legacy, they're current, so if we ran numbers right now, that would look incredibly high, but that's because video hasn't been processed, so it's not at the same date. So we're normally, when we would say our Easy Pass penetration is X, then that means 100% of transactions as of that point in time would have been calculated. And since that's not where we're at, any numbers will be skewed.
Jeff, I also want to say that obviously we're stepping up our efforts to try and get more people on Easy Pass. There's no question about that. And we have marketing that's been out and going out to do so. So we do have a strong effort to do that. However, one of those strategies, if you will, is as we move to video toll, which began January 1st, our hope was that when people start getting those bills and they see they get a 50% discount with an Easy Pass, that would push a lot of people to Easy Pass usage, okay? However, due to the backlog that we have, those January, February video tolls will not go out for months. So we're not going to have the benefit of people seeing those immediately and then flipping over to Easy Pass. That's one of our challenges.
I do have a little bit of anecdotal evidence, if you will, about Easy Pass. We established an appointments line in October to try to drive customers towards our customer service centers and to be able to help support, given how challenging keeping up with all the phone calls has been. And that appointments line has supported over 3,000 incoming phone calls. And we've scheduled over 1,600 appointments with customers. And of the more than 3,000 calls, almost 1,500 of them were related to getting an Easy Pass or meeting some Easy Pass need. So we're definitely seeing a interest in getting it. But as Deb mentioned, penetration rates are kind of figured out over time with actual usage. So we sort of need to track that metric a little more. But anecdotally, we are seeing a lot of interest in obtaining an Easy Pass.
Thanks, Will. You just prompted something else in my head. We're putting out a press release today to increase our hours for our service centers, and that would include the service centers at the MVA facilities. And of course, MVA is one of those areas where when you register your car or do other functions on the MVA website, it prompts you for an Easy Pass, and they've been a very good advocate for us in increasing Easy Pass usage.
Okay. Any other discussion?
Just
Deb,
something that
you have other things. Go ahead.
Yeah, just something to add. With we can, coming month or so, we can work on documenting a plan. I mean, a plan is we meet weekly. We go through strategies. We follow up on our action items. This is extremely weedy activity that internally we do. And, it's about collecting revenue. It's about processing transactions, and it's about mailing notices. The processing transaction piece, that's the automated piece. That's the easy pass piece. Whether it's an ITOL that required image review or it automatically posts. And getting transactions over to conduit. That's what needs to achieve. That's what we're focused on. And each time we hit a new obstacle, because the obstacles and challenges that we're facing today, some of those did not exist a month ago. And challenges that we faced a month ago, we've already addressed and resolved, and we're on to our new set of challenges. It's very fluid. That's worked on a regular basis. When we transition, and this is something else that's beginning up the work, is to talk about after transition. Image review and trip construction for these transactions have been performed by CAPS. So once we're transitioned, in theory, all of our bottleneck or choke point today is image review. That choke point won't exist once we transition. So they will be able to pass transactions over to TransCore and process ITOLs and all that. Now, we're going to be working on our plan for what that looks like and how to take a large volume of transactions and process them. Now, this choke point with image review, there's a lot, all of image review has been automated on the CAPS side. And so for every single lane, regardless of the facility, image review starts out on an automated through, they're called OCR engines, that initially processes transactions. And it only goes to a manual review if certain confidence levels can't be achieved. On the conduit side, all images for legacy facilities are manual. And that's because how their system was developed, these were cached plazas that they don't have the automation like the new systems do, or like the ICC and the ETLs do. So it's, our focus is with getting transactions processed. And every time a new set of challenges comes up, we work those.
Thank you, Deb. And Will, thank you. And Jim. Any other comments? That is the last item on the agenda. So we have come to the end of all the items on the agenda, and that gets us to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. Second?
Aye.
Okay. Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion, okay, is accepted. We are hereby adjourned. Thank you. Thank you all.
Yay.
Yes.
Member Harris, just literally when you're making the motion, I received the information. I did ask the question, what is our current unencumbered cash balance this moment? And it is $475 million. So we're still well above our $350 million requirement.
That's good. All right. Thank you, Deb. Thanks for that information. All righty. Well, then we are hereby. Okay. Member Ardinger, did you have a comment?
No.
Okay. All righty. We're hereby adjourned. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.